I'm Carl, 62 male. I live a quiet life in the same Tampa suburb I've been in for 40 years, in the house my late wife and I made a home. After 3 decades as a fire captain, routine and order are just part of my DNA. But that predictable peace was about to be shattered by my son-in-law, who decided to put a price tag on my relationship with my own grandchildren, forcing me to make a choice I never imagined. Before this story unfolds, I'd love to connect with you. Please let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is in your corner of the world. It's amazing to see how far these stories can travel. The Saturday morning quiet was broken by the distinct low growl of a German engine. I didn't need to look out the window to know it was Neil's BMW pulling into my driveway. That engine had a sound of its own, a smooth, expensive purr paid for with money that should have been used for his family's security. I placed my coffee mug on the coaster beside my armchair and waited. He wouldn't knock. He never did. The front door swung open, and Neil Vance strode in as if he held the deed to the property. Perhaps in his mind he did. "Carl, hey, good to see you're home on a weekend." His smile was broad and polished, the kind he probably practiced in the mirror. It was the same expression he'd worn 2 years prior when he'd first asked for a $3,000 loan for a so-called consulting opportunity that never seemed to materialize. "Got a second? I wanted to run something by you," he said, oozing confidence. I carefully folded my newspaper, creating a sharp crease down its spine. "I've got time, Neil." He sank into the armchair opposite me, adopting a familiar posture, leaning forward, elbows on his knees, hands clasped. It was the stance of a man about to let you in on a secret, a golden opportunity that was exclusively for you. I'd seen it far too many times. "There's this incredible investment, a real estate deal down in Tampa. It's ground floor, Carl. My partner needs all commitments by Monday and I'm just 5,000 short of my buy-in." He spread his hands wide, a gesture of transparent honesty. "I know this is sudden, but a chance like this is a once-in-a-lifetime thing." I took a slow sip of my coffee. It was already cooling. What became of the other once-in-a-lifetime chances? My voice was steady and level, the same tone I used to give commands at a 3-alarm fire, calm, precise, and leaving no room for misunderstanding. His practiced smile faltered. "What do you mean by that?" "The consulting gig back in February of 23, that was 3,000. The crypto platform in July of that year, another 4, and the marketing startup last April, that was 5,000 more." I held his gaze, letting the numbers hang in the air between us. "That comes to $12,000 in total, Neil. I've kept a record." The smile vanished completely. He leaned back and the confident mask he wore so well began to show hairline cracks. "Those were investments, Carl, not personal loans. You understand how business operates. There are risks." His tone had a new sharpness to it. "Some ventures just need more time to mature." "2 years is more than enough time for something to mature," I replied, setting my mug down on the end table with a quiet click. "The answer is no." He shot up from the chair, a sudden, aggressive movement intended to put me on the defensive. He started pacing the length of my living room, 3 steps toward the window, 3 steps back. "You spent 30 years charging into burning buildings, Carl. With all due respect, what does that teach you about building real wealth in today's world?" He gestured dismissively at my living room. The furniture was modest, well-kept, but clearly from another era. "You're content sitting in this same house, with the same old furniture trapped in the same outdated way of thinking. The world has changed." "I'm comfortable," I stated simply. My hands rested calmly on the arms of my chair. "And I earned everything I have." "Comfortable?" He let out a short, mirthless laugh. "You know where comfortable gets you? Nowhere. Meanwhile, Elena and I are trying to build a future for Leo and Sam, and you're getting hung up on ancient history." "That ancient history is $12,000 of my money that I'll likely never see again." His jaw worked, a muscle flexing in his cheek. He stopped his pacing and stood directly over me, forcing me to tilt my head back to look at him. It was a classic power move designed to intimidate. "Let me spell something out for you, old man." The words were slow and deliberate, each one a carefully placed stone. "You think you're an expert on modern finance because you read the paper and watched the evening news. You're not. This investment is happening with or without your help. I was offering you a chance to be a part of your family's success." "I am part of this family," my grip on the armrest's GH10 almost imperceptibly. "I'm Alina's father, I'm those boys' grandfather." "Are you?" He tilted his head, studying me as if I were a puzzle he was trying to solve. "Because from my perspective, you're picking your bank account over your own daughter and grandsons." The implied threat was unmistakable, hanging thick and heavy in the air. "The answer is still no." I said, my voice quiet but firm, the same way ID once told a rookie firefighter that the roof above him was about to collapse. I'm finished enabling this behavior. His expression turned to ice. All pretense of family connection, of friendly negotiation was gone. Your call, he said, straightening his expensive jacket. But don't act surprised when Alina stops answering your calls, and you can forget about seeing Leo and Sam. This is your choice right here, right now. You're the one making it. He turned and walked to the door, pausing with his hand on the knob. Think long and hard about what you're throwing away for $5,000. Then he was gone. The door clicked shut behind him, not slammed, but closed with a finality that echoed in the sudden silence. I watched through the window as he got into his BMW and reversed out of the driveway, barely glancing in the rearview mirror. I sat there, motionless. My coffee mug, the folded newspaper, everything in the room was exactly as it had been 15 minutes ago, yet the entire foundation of my family had just shifted beneath my feet. I stood up and walked to the fireplace mantel, where a silver-framed photo from last Christmas was displayed. Leo and Sam beamed at the camera, their smiles full of missing teeth and pure joy. My daughter Alina stood between them, her hands resting on their shoulders, her own smile genuine and warm. Neil was positioned just slightly off to the side, his smile not quite reaching his eyes. I remembered that day clearly. It was only a year after I had finished paying off their mortgage. A staggering $73,000 paid out over 3 years. Every single payment made on time because Alina had called me in tears, terrified they were going to lose their house. I had watched my savings account, the one I'd built over a lifetime of service, dwindle month after month, reassuring myself that it was for a good cause. It was for family. The additional $12,000 in so-called investment loans had all come after that, after Neil already knew I was a sure thing, a soft touch who would do anything for his daughter and grandsons. I picked up my phone and stared at Alina's contact photo, my thumb hovering over the call button, but I knew what would happen. Neil would be right there, coaching her, or he would have already prepped her on what to say, how to manage her outdated father. I put the phone back down. The normal sounds of a Saturday morning drifted in from outside, a lawnmower starting up, kids laughing down the street. Life was going on, but mine had just come to a screeching halt. I returned to my armchair and sat, the folded newspaper and cold coffee forgotten. I didn't move for what felt like hours, just sitting there as a cold, hard feeling began to crystallize in my chest. It wasn't quite anger. It was something colder, more focused. It was the chilling clarity of recognition, a complete understanding of what had just happened and what would have to happen next. By that evening, I had tried to call Alina 5 times. The first attempt went directly to her voicemail, her cheerful, pre-recorded voice asking me to leave a message. On the second try, the phone rang 4 times before the voicemail picked up. For the third, I let it ring and ring until the call disconnected automatically. On the 4th attempt, she answered, "Dad, I can't talk right now." Her voice was a strained whisper. "Alina, what's going on?" I kept my tone soft but firm. "Just talk to me for a minute." I have to go." The line went dead. The call had lasted 6 seconds. My 5th call went to voicemail again. This time I left a message. "Alina, it's Dad. I just need to know that you and the boys are okay. Please call me when you get a chance." She never called back. I spent the rest of Saturday evening at my kitchen table, my phone placed squarely in front of me, waiting. The silence stretched into the night. I made myself dinner, grilled chicken and rice, but ate it without tasting a thing. The phone remained stubbornly silent. I knew Neil was behind this. His threat wasn't idle. He was isolating me, using my daughter and my grandsons as leverage. This wasn't just about money anymore, it was about control. He wanted to prove that he held all the cards, that my access to my own family was a privilege he could grant or revoke at will. The feeling in my chest hardened from a cold recognition into a grim resolve. For years, I had given him the benefit of the doubt. I had seen him as a flawed but ambitious man trying to provide for his family. I had excused his failures as bad luck and his constant need for cash as the cost of doing business. But now, seeing his strategy so clearly laid out, I realized my mistake. I hadn't been helping him, I had been feeding an addiction. Not to a substance, but to risk, to easy money, and to the power he felt by manipulating those around him. The most painful part was Alina's role in it all. Was she a willing participant or a victim trapped in his web? Her whispered, panicked voice on the phone suggested the latter, but her silence spoke volumes. She was choosing his side, whether out of fear or loyalty, and that choice was a betrayal that cut deeper than any financial loss. The $12,000 was just money. The loss of my daughter's trust felt like a wound that might never heal. I went to bed late that night, but I didn't sleep. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, replaying every conversation, every transaction, every broken promise. I had spent my career running into burning buildings to save people. I knew how to assess a structure, identify the weak points, and predict the moment of collapse. Neil had built a fragile structure of lies and manipulation, and he had just set it on fire himself. And as I lay there in the dark, I decided it was time to stop fighting the fire. It was time to let it burn. By Sunday morning, my path was set. The 15-minute drive to Maple Ridge Drive was one I could make with my eyes closed, a route I'd taken hundreds of times for birthdays, holidays, and spontaneous visits. This time, however, every red light felt like an eternity, every turn a deliberate step forward. I wasn't racing to an emergency, I was calmly walking into the heart of one. Their house, the one my retirement savings had secured, looked as it always did: red brick, neat white trim, and landscaping I had helped Neil install 2 summers ago. My old pickup truck looked out of place parked next to his polished BMW, a working man's vehicle beside a symbol of unearned luxury. I walked up to the front door and knocked firmly. I waited. Through the narrow window beside the door, I saw shadows moving in the hallway. Neil opened it, but he didn't step back to let me in. He filled the doorway, a human barrier. "Carl," he said, his voice flat and devoid of emotion. "This isn't a good time. The boys have a full schedule of activities today." Over his shoulder, I could see into the living room. Leo and Sam were on the floor, building an elaborate fortress out of colorful blocks. Their excited chatter filled the background, the pure sound of childhood innocence. Elena moved in the periphery, carrying plates from the kitchen to the dining room, a ghost in her own home. "I'd like to see them," I said, keeping my hands visibly at my sides. "Just for a few minutes." Like I said, not a good time. He shifted his weight, crossing his arms over his chest. It was a posture of defiance. "They're busy, we have a schedule to keep." "5 minutes, Neil." "No." We stood there in a silent standoff, separated by nothing more than a wooden threshold. Just then Leo's voice rose in a shout of triumph. "Sam, look, the tower is taller than me." The sound of my voice must have carried inside because both boys suddenly looked toward the front door. "Grandpa!" Leo dropped his blocks and scrambled to his feet, running toward the entrance. Sam was right behind him, their small feet thundering on the hardwood floors. They collided with Neil's legs, trying to squeeze past him. Sam, being smaller, managed to duck under his father's arm and launched himself at me. I knelt just in time to catch him, wrapping him in a tight hug. "Grandpa, we made a fort yesterday. Mom let us sleep in it." His words tumbled out in a happy rush. "And I lost another tooth, see?" He pulled his lip back to show me the new gap in his smile. Leo was still struggling to get past Neil, who had now clamped a hand on his shoulder. "Boys," Neil's voice was sharp, cutting through their excitement like a knife. "Inside, now." "But Grandpa just got here," Leo pleaded. I said now. Neil's grip tightened, and he physically turned Leo back toward the living room. "Sam, let go of your grandfather." Sam's arms, which had been wrapped tightly around my neck, loosened. I could feel his confusion, the way a child senses adult tension without understanding its source. "It's okay, buddy," I said, ruffling his hair as I stood up. I gave him a gentle nudge toward his father. "You go on inside." Both boys retreated, their faces a mixture of disappointment and a new, unsettling emotion that looked like fear. Elena had appeared in the hallway behind Neil. Our eyes met for a brief moment. She looked tired, her shoulders slumped inward. She opened her mouth as if to speak, then closed it. She mouthed a single word I couldn't quite decipher. It could have been sorry, or it could have been help. Neil waited until the boys were out of sight before he spoke again, leaning casually against the doorframe, his confident. "See, restored. Here's the new arrangement, Carl," he began. "If you want to spend time with Leo and Sam, the rate is $2,000 per weekend. You're taking up my time as their father and you're disrupting our family schedule. Think of it as a consultation fee." The words were delivered with calculated precision, a statement of fact, not a negotiation. $2,000, I repeated, the words tasting like ash in my mouth. "Per weekend, cash," he confirmed with a slight, smug smile. "You want to be the grandfather of the year, that's the price of admission. Otherwise, I'm afraid we're just too busy. The schedule is packed, you get it right." I looked past him to where Elena was now pressed against the hallway wall, her arms wrapped around her own waist. When our eyes met again, she gave a tiny, almost imperceptible shake of her head. It wasn't a gesture of defiance, but one of complete resignation. "I see," I said, my voice flat and empty. I couldn't trust myself to say anything more. "Good talk," Neil said, pushing himself off the doorframe. His hand was already on the door, ready to close it. "Let me know what you decide." The door shut and I heard the distinct sound of the deadbolt sliding into place. I stood on the porch for a moment, staring at the closed door, at the brass numbers of the address, at the welcome mat that was now a symbol of bitter irony. Then I turned, walked back to my truck, and got inside. I sat for a minute, my hands gripping the steering wheel. Through the front window of the house, I could see the boys had gone back to their blocks. Sam glanced toward the door once more before Neil said something to him, and he turned away for good. The discovery was complete. Neil wasn't just a manipulator, he was an extortionist, and my own family was his hostage. The drive home was a blur. Unlike the deliberate, tense journey to their house, the return trip was fueled by a cold, clear purpose. I pulled into my garage, walked inside, and went straight to the old safe in my bedroom closet. 3 turns to the right, 2 to the left, one final turn to the right. The heavy steel door swung open with a familiar groan. Inside were the documents that constituted a life. My birth certificate, my honorable discharge from the service, insurance policies, and buried beneath it all, a thick manila folder labeled Maple Ridge Property. I carried it to the kitchen table and laid its contents out under the bright overhead light. The mortgage documents were all there, meticulously organized by date. I had copies of every check I'd written, each one paperclipped to the corresponding monthly statement from the bank. The total was right there in black and white, $73,000. The final letter from the mortgage company confirming the loan was paid in full was dated just 18 months ago. I took a fresh legal pad from a kitchen drawer and a pen. At the top of the first page, I wrote Neil Vance account ledger. Then, in my neat, blocky handwriting, I began to list every transaction. February 2023, $3,000 consulting opportunity. July 2023, $4,000 cryptocurrency platform. April 2024, $5,000 marketing venture. Below that, I added another section. Maple Ridge mortgage payments, Jan 2022, June 2023, total $73,000. My pen hovered over the paper for a moment before I added one final, chilling entry. March 2025, $2,000 weekend demanded for access to grandchildren. I set the pen down and stared at the list. The numbers didn't lie. They told a story of systematic exploitation, of a son-in-law who saw his family not as a source of love and support, but as an unending line of credit. The property deed itself lay next to the legal pad, a thick stack of pages filled with dense legal jargon describing ownership, rights, and obligations. I'd given it a cursory read when I first agreed to make the payments, but I hadn't looked at it since. Now I pulled it closer and began to read again, this time with the focused intensity of a detective examining a piece of evidence. Every word mattered. The notary's embossed seal at the bottom of the signature page caught my eye. March 15, 2022, 3 years ago. My finger traced the raised indentation and the memory came flooding back with perfect clarity. I was standing in this very kitchen when Alina had called, her voice breaking with every word. Dad, we're going to lose the house. I could hear Sam, who would have been just 4 years old, crying in the background, his sobs mirroring his mother's panic. The bank sent the final notice. We have 30 days and I don't know what we're going to do. My retirement account statement was sitting on the counter, showing a balance of just over $72,000, nearly everything I had saved over 30 years. How much do you need? I asked, my voice steady, the captain and me taking over. All of it, the full payoff. Dad, I know it's everything you've saved, but I'll take care of it, I hadn't. Erupted. There had been a long pause on her end. Are you sure that's your retirement? You're my daughter, those boys are my grandsons, I'm sure. The next morning I was at the bank. The branch manager, a kind woman named Patricia, had looked at the withdrawal slip and then at me, her expression a mixture of concern and professional duty. Mr. Mendez, this is nearly your entire savings. Are you certain about this? I am, I'd said. The notary's office was a small, unassuming place in a strip mall. The notary, a meticulous older man named Mr. Hendricks, had spread the mortgage payoff documents across his desk. Mr. Mendez, he'd said, looking at me over his reading glasses, you have options for how to structure this transaction. You can make this a formal gift to your daughter and son-in-law, or you can structure it as a secured loan against the property itself. What's the difference? I had asked. A gift is final. You're transferring the wealth with no expectation of repayment, he explained. A loan, especially one secured by the property, protects your investment. If they were ever to default on repayment terms, you would have legal recourse. Given the amount, I would strongly recommend the loan structure. The idea had felt cold, almost transactional. It doesn't mean you don't trust them, Mr. Hendricks had added, as if sensing my hesitation. It means you're being prudent. Money complicates family matters. This protects everyone involved. Make it a loan, I had decided. The paperwork took an hour to complete. Mr. Hendricks had patiently explained every clause, every protection, every stipulation. I had signed my name over and over again, establishing the debt, securing my interest, and setting repayment terms that, as I now knew, were never intended to be met. Back in the present, sitting at my kitchen table, I looked at the numbers on my legal pad. $12,000 in additional loans that were never repaid, and now a demand for $2,000 a weekend. I pulled the deed closer, my eyes finding the precise language Mr. Hendricks had insisted upon: secured loan against property located at 2847 Maple Ridge Drive. In the event of default, lender maintains priority interest. I hadn't been saving their home. I had been funding Neil's next gamble and the one after that. The loan was secured by the property, and the deed of trust was still in my name as the lien holder. The wise notary had been right. He had protected me, even when I hadn't fully understood what I needed protection from. I gathered the papers, straightening them into a neat stack. The mortgage deed, the payment records, my handwritten ledger, $73,000 plus $12,000. It totaled $85,000. I had given them a home, believing I was building a future for my grandsons. Now those same documents gave me the power to reclaim it. The kitchen had grown dark around me. I reached for the light switch but stopped. The darkness felt right. It was clarifying. I had confused protecting my family with feeding my son-in-law's addiction to risk. I finally saw the difference. The property documents remained on my kitchen table for 3 weeks, a constant, silent reminder of the decision I had to make. I went about my daily routines: coffee at 6, newspaper at 7, lunch at noon, but my mind was elsewhere. I spent hours on my laptop, researching Florida property law, poring over statutes about subordinate interests, foreclosure timelines, and notice requirements. I took detailed notes in the margins of my legal pad, my investigation becoming more thorough with each passing day. The calendar on my wall showed April was approaching. I circled April 19th and 20th in red ink and wrote Lake Tarpon bass fishing beside the dates. It was an annual tradition. I'd taken Leo and Sam fishing on that lake every spring since Leo turned 6. They loved everything about it: the early morning start, the thrill of a tug on the line, the friendly competition to see who could catch the biggest fish. I went out to the garage and pulled my old tackle box down from a high shelf. It was dusty, but the contents were familiar. The hooks were rusted and needed replacing. The monofilament line on the reels was likely brittle from age. I made a list: new lines, split shot weights, and a fresh pack of chartreuse plastic worms. The fishing rods were leaning in the corner, exactly where we'd left them last year. I ran my hand along the smooth graphite of Sam's smaller rod, picturing his small hands gripping it, his face a mask of concentration as he learned to cast. On a Wednesday evening, I waited until 7:30 to call. I knew from experience that Neil often had business meetings on Wednesday nights, usually returning late. I wanted to speak to Alina alone. She answered on the third ring. "Hello," her voice was quiet, cautious. "Alina, it's Dad," I said, keeping my tone light and casual. "I was just thinking the weather is supposed to be perfect for bass fishing next weekend." I was hopping to take the boys out to Lake Tarpon. There was a long silence on the other end. "Oh, Dad, let me ask Neil. He handles the boys' schedule now." Handles, the word struck me, not we decide together or I'll check our calendar. He handles it. Since when do you need his permission for your father to see his grandsons? I tried to keep the sharpness out of my voice, but it was a struggle. "It's not like that," she said, her voice defensive. He's better at coordinating all their activities. They have sports, school projects, there's a lot to keep track of." "Put Leo on the phone," I said. "I want to ask him about fishing myself." Another pause, this one longer and heavier. I could hear her breathing, quick and shallow. "They're already in bed, Dad. It's a school night." I glanced at the clock on my microwave. 7:43 p.m. Leo was 10 and Sam was 7. Neither of them had gone to bed before 8:30 since they were toddlers. "It's not even 8 o'clock, Alina." "They were tired. They had an early day tomorrow," she stammered. "I'll call you on Saturday, okay? We'll figure something out." Her voice had the same defeated, apologetic tone it had when she stood behind Neil in the doorway. Trapped. "Alina." "I have to go, Dad. I'll call you." The line went dead. I placed my phone on the counter and stared at it. "He handles the schedule. They're already in bed. I'll call you." Lies, all of them. She didn't call on Saturday. Instead, my phone rang on Thursday afternoon. Neil's name flashed on the screen. I let it ring twice, composing myself before I answered. "Carl," he said, skipping any form of greeting. "Alina told me about your fishing idea." I remained silent, waiting for the inevitable. "The boys have commitments that weekend. Leo has a soccer tournament and Sam has a birthday party on Sunday. Their schedule is completely booked." He paused for effect. "Of course, if you were to reconsider your position on financially supporting this family, I'm sure we could find some free time in their calendar. We could work something out." He was circling back to his extortion demand, $2,000 per weekend. The price for access to my own grandsons was firm. "I see," I replied, my voice a flat, neutral wall. "Thank you for letting me know. Just something for you to think about, Carl. Those boys are growing up fast. There are a lot of weekends between now and when they're teenagers who have no interest in hanging out with their grandpa. It would be a shame to miss all of them over a matter of principle." "I'll keep that in mind." "You do that," he hung up. I stood in my kitchen, the phone still in my hand, watching my neighbor, Mrs. Patterson, watering her roses across the street. A normal Thursday afternoon in a normal neighborhood. Commitments. Schedule supporting the family. The words echoed in my head, a bitter reminder of Neil's twisted logic. I had supported them. I had given them a home. I had poured my life savings into their future, and in return, Neil had turned that home into a cage and my love for my grandsons into a weapon against me. I set the phone down, walked back to the kitchen table, and opened my laptop beside the stack of property documents. I typed "Real Estate Attorney Tampa Eviction" into the search bar. A list of law firms appeared. I clicked on the first one, Buchanan and Associates, with an office downtown. Their website listed their services: landlord-tenant disputes, property recovery, foreclosure assistance. I found their contact page and stared at the phone number. Neil thought he was in control. He thought he could monetize my love. He had built his entire system of control within the walls of a house that he believed was his. But he had forgotten one crucial detail, a detail that Mr. Hendricks, the notary, had ensured was legally binding. The house wasn't his. The loan was secured against the property, and every legal protection was in my name. I picked up my phone and dialed the number from the website. A receptionist answered on the second ring, her voice professional and polite. "Buchanan and Associates, how may I direct your call?" "I need to speak with an attorney about a property recovery matter," I said, my voice steady and calm, the captain taking command. "I have a secured loan that is in default, and I need to understand my options." "Let me connect you with Mr. Buchanan's office. May I have your name, please?" "Carl Mendez." "One moment, Mr. Mendez." The line clicked over to hold music. I looked at the fishing rods I had optimistically prepped, at the calendar with its circled dates. I had done enough supporting. It was time to collect. A week of phone calls with lawyers and a flurry of paperwork culminated in a single white envelope, which I placed carefully in the inside pocket of my jacket. It was a Friday afternoon, and as I parked my truck at the curb, not in the driveway, this was not a social call. The sound of children's laughter reached me before I even shut the door. Leo and Sam were in the front yard, engrossed in a game of soccer with a set of rules they had clearly invented on the spot. Sam kicked the ball wildly and it rolled toward the sidewalk just as I stepped onto it. "I got it!" Leo shouted, then stopped short when he saw me. His face lit up. "Grandpa!" They both abandoned their game and ran toward me. Sam reached me first, wrapping his arms around my legs with the absolute certainty that I would catch him, which I did, kneeling to meet his embrace. "You came? Are we going fishing tomorrow?" His words tumbled out. "Mom said maybe, but Dad said no, but you're here so we can go, right?" Leo arrived a second later, more reserved at 10 but just as happy to see me. "Did you bring the tackle box? I've been practicing my casting in the backyard." I hugged them both, the weight of my purpose settling heavily on my shoulders. "We'll see, guys, we'll see." The front door opened and Neil stepped onto the porch. He paused for a moment before walking across the lawn with slow, deliberate steps, his arms already crossing over his chest in a posture of defiance. "What are you doing here, Carl?" he asked, his voice sharp with annoyance. "I thought we settled this." I stood up, keeping a reassuring hand on Sam's shoulder. "I'm here to take the boys fishing, just like we do every spring." He let out a short, humorless laugh. "Right, we already discussed this on the phone, remember?" He glanced down at the boys, then back at me, a smug, almost amused expression on his face. $2,000, that's the price of admission if you want to play grandfather this weekend." "Play grandfather?" As if loving these boys was just a role I could choose to afford or not. Here, I said, my voice steady. I reached into my jacket, pulled out the white envelope and held it out to him. This is what you've earned. His expression flickered from surprise to pure satisfaction. He thought he had won, that I had finally caved to his demands. He snatched the envelope from my hand and ripped it open, pulling out the folded sheaf of legal documents inside. His eyes scanned the text, quickly at first, then more slowly as the words began to register. I watched his face as the transformation occurred. First came confusion, his brow furrowing, then dawning comprehension, his eyes widening in disbelief. Finally, the color drained from his face, only to be replaced by a dark, furious flush. "What is this?" he choked out, his voice rising. "You can't." "Read it carefully," I said, my tone even and calm. "You have 30 days to vacate the premises." "This is my house," he yelled, shaking the papers at me as if they were a personal insult. "You gave this to us, you can't just—" "It's my house," I stated, my eyes locked on his. "It always has been. The mortgage payoff was a secured loan. The notary made sure of that. You never paid back a single cent. The loan is in default." "You're insane," he turned toward the house and bellowed. "Alina, get out here now." But I was already turning back toward my truck. The boys stood frozen between us, their earlier joy replaced by wide-eyed confusion. Sam looked like he was about to cry. "We'll go fishing soon," I told them, forcing a smile. "I promise." "You can't evict us," Neil's voice followed me, growing louder and more desperate. "We have rights, this is our home." I opened my car door. Through the front window of the house, I could see Alina's silhouette. She was standing in the doorway, a frozen statue. She didn't come outside. 30 days, Neil," I said without looking back. "That's what the law requires. I suggest you use them wisely." "I'll fight this, I'll sue you. You'll never see these kids again, you understand me? Never." I got in, closed the door, and started the engine. In my rearview mirror, Neil was standing in the middle of the driveway, the eviction notice still clutched in his hand. Leo had moved to stand beside him, looking small and lost. Sam was walking toward Alina, who had finally stepped onto the porch. I pulled away from the curb at a steady, controlled speed. There was no rushing, no fleeing, just a calm, deliberate departure. Neil's enraged shouts followed me down the street, the words losing their meaning with distance. At the stop sign at the end of the block, I glanced in the mirror one last time. He was on his phone, pacing furiously, the white papers crumpled in his fist. He was already calling his lawyer or a friend or anyone he thought could fix the mess he had created. Let him try. The answer to my action came just 6 days later, in an official envelope from the Superior Court of Hillsborough County. It was a countersuit. Neil was claiming the $73,000 had been a gift, not a loan, and he was demanding the eviction be dismissed with prejudice. I contacted Mr. Buchanan, who referred me to a colleague, David Wade, a specialist in property disputes. Wade was sharp and efficient. After reviewing my meticulous documentation, he was confident. "He can claim anything he wants," Wade had said, "but the documents speak for themselves. His case is built on sand." The court date was set for May 28th. The hearing was mercifully brief. The judge, a no-nonsense woman in her 50s, reviewed the notarized loan agreement, the county-filed lien, and my records of non-payment. She then turned to Neil's attorney. "Counselor," she asked, her tone pointed, "do you have any documentation whatsoever to support the claim that this was a gift?" "Not in writing, Your Honor, but the family understanding." "I asked about documentation," the judge cut him off. "His intent is clearly stated in the loan agreement he and his wife signed." She tapped the papers in front of her. "The documentation is clear and proper. The eviction notice is valid. Defendants have until June 30th to vacate the property." The gavel came down with a sharp crack of finality. It was over. The confrontation had moved from my daughter's front lawn to a court of law, and the outcome was the same. The truth, backed by paperwork, had won. In the courthouse hallway, David Wade shook my hand. "Congratulations, Mr. Mendez, a clean victory." But it didn't feel like a victory. It felt like a necessary, painful procedure had been completed. The core problem remained. "What about my grandsons?" I asked. "This doesn't fix the fact that I can't see them." Wade gave me the name of a family law attorney, Margaret Stone. 20 minutes later, I was sitting in her office, recounting the entire sordid story, the loans, the blocked calls, the $2,000 demand. She listened patiently, taking notes. "Florida law provides for grandparent visitation rights when it serves the child's best interest," she explained. "Your situation, with the systematic blocking of contact and unreasonable financial demands, fits the criteria perfectly. We can file a petition for court-ordered visitation." Will it make things worse with my daughter? I asked, the question heavy with dread. Possibly, Stone admitted honestly, but without court intervention, Neil controls all access. This takes that power away from him. I wrote another check, this one for $2,800. The legal battles were draining my remaining savings, but what choice did I have? The petition was filed that Friday. Neil was served the following Monday. He now faced a war on two fronts: eviction from his home and a legal challenge to his control over his children. The pressure began to mount. The eviction deadline of June 30th came and went, with Neil making no move to leave. But the legal system, though slow, is relentless. Meanwhile, their attempts to find a new place to live were failing. As Alina would later tell me, landlord after landlord rejected their application, citing Neil's abysmal credit score and the recent legal judgments that now appeared on his record. His life, built on charm and borrowed money, was collapsing. He tried to get a loan from a bank and was summarily rejected. Then Wade and I filed a third lawsuit, a debt collection case for the $12,000 in unpaid personal loans. When Neil was served with those papers, Alina said he exploded, accusing my father of trying to destroy him. For the first time, she had pushed back, however weakly. Dad did loan you that money, Neil. He had turned on her, questioning her loyalty, but a crack had appeared in her resolve. The breaking point came from an innocent question. Leo found his mother on the phone one afternoon and asked, "Mom, why can't we see Grandpa anymore? Did we do something wrong?" That was it. That was the question that shattered Alina's carefully constructed denial. She locked herself in the bathroom for 2 hours. When she emerged, she called me for the first time in months. "Dad," she said, her voice breaking, "everything's falling apart. I don't know what to do." I listened as she poured out her fear and confusion. They couldn't find a place to live. The boys missed me terribly. Neil had no plan, no money, and no one to blame but me. "You and the boys can always stay with me," I said gently. "My door is always open." "I can't," she whispered. "He would never," she trailed off. "I just needed to hear your voice, Dad." She had called, that was all that mattered. The wall Neil had built around her was crumbling. The family court hearing for visitation rights took place in mid-July. My neighbor, Mrs. Patterson, testified to seeing me turned away at the door multiple times. Then Stone called Alina to the stand. Under oath, my daughter couldn't lie. She testified that I had always been a loving, involved grandfather. She admitted that Neil was the one who had cut off contact. When asked if I had ever done anything to suggest I shouldn't be around her children, she looked directly at Stone and said, "No. He loves them, he's a good grandfather." The judge granted a temporary visitation order on the spot. Every saw to. Our day, 10 a.m. to 6 p.m., effective immediately. Outside the courtroom, I witnessed Neil confront Alina, hissing, "You just sided with him against me." Alina pulled her arm free from his grasp. "Maybe I finally have," she said, her voice shaking but firm. The first Saturday back was a slice of heaven. The boys were waiting on the curb when I arrived. We went to Lake Tarpon. We fished, we ate sandwiches, and we talked. It felt normal. It felt right. On August 2nd, the sheriff's department executed the forced eviction. Wade called to inform me that Neil and Alina had been given 2 hours to remove their essentials before the locks were changed. They moved into a small, cramped apartment. Shortly after, the debt collection case was settled. Neil agreed to a payment plan of $400 a month. I accepted it against Wade's advice because Alina had called and asked me to. She was trying to get on her feet, and I wouldn't stand in her way. A few weeks later, she called again. "Dad," she said, her voice clearer than I'd heard it in years, "I'm thinking about leaving him. I can't let the boys grow up thinking this is what a family is supposed to look like." I told her what I had always told her. My home was her home. She wasn't ready yet, but she was getting there. The final court order for permanent visitation rights came in late August. It was official. My Saturdays with my grandsons were protected by law. Neil, stripped of his assets and his power, was reduced to working a delivery gig to make his monthly payments to me. The man who demanded $2,000 a weekend was now earning $20 an hour. That Saturday, as the sun set over the lake, painting the water in shades of orange and gold, Sam turned to me. "Grandpa," he said, "we're going to do this every Saturday now, right? Forever." I looked at my two grandsons, their faces lit by the fading light, their trust in me absolute. "Every Saturday, buddy," I said. "Rain or shine, that's a promise." It had cost me nearly all of my savings and months of heartache. But as I drove the boys home, their sleepy heads lolling in the backseat, I knew I hadn't lost anything. I had reclaimed what was most precious. Neil had his consequences. Alina was finding her strength, and I had my Saturdays. That was more than justice. That was peace.